A machete-wielding killer terrorizes a city morgue employee and her friends, and they must work together to survive the night. In the city morgue, Amy wheels a newly delivered body to the scale room. Her coworker, Seth, sees the transparent mask over the corpse's face and deduces he was a burn victim. The man removes the face cover and sets it aside. Then he tells the woman it's okay if she heads out early, especially since it'll be her birthday in a few hours. Amy says it's fine if she stays for the remaining 10 minutes of her shift since she's only meeting friends for drinks anyway. Seth calls her over to another gurney and surprises her with a coffin-shaped birthday cake. Much to the woman's delight, she thanks him with a hug and asks that he join them for drinks because she'd like him to meet her friends. However, he politely declines because he has to work the graveyard shift and adds that their boss won't appreciate it if he takes a leave of absence just to go drinking. In the office, their wheelchair-bound boss, Holden, greets Amy with a happy birthday before informing her that her shift just ended. So she asks for her phone, which was kept in a safe as a precaution to discourage employees from possibly taking pictures of the bodies and posting them online. Suddenly, they watch a news report on the TV about a mass murderer at the derelict Blackwell Hotel believed to be by the infamous God's Hand killer. Then, Holden answers a call from the authorities telling him that 9 bodies from the said crime are on their way to the morgue. Instead of leaving, Amy chooses to stay and help out. Then she steps out of the room to call her friends regarding the change of plans. In the office, Holden teases Seth about how he's too scared to ask the woman out on a date. Meanwhile, Amy leaves her friend Tamara a voicemail and says she can't meet them tonight. After the call, she returns to the office and hands her phone back to the boss. In the ambulance, paramedics defibrillate a man, and a woman asks her colleague if they should save him. Seconds later, they pronounce him dead and head to the morgue. Eventually, Amy and Seth wait for the last delivery, Jacob Goodnight, the man whom the paramedics failed to resuscitate, and the same person the authorities believe committed the brutal murders at the Blackwell Hotel. As they wheel the body to the elevator, Seth drops something on the floor just as the doors close, leaving the woman all alone in the carriage. When the doors open, Amy wonders where her coworker is, since he said he'll take the stairs. Suddenly, he scares her from behind, startling the woman. In the scale room, they weigh and measure the body and learn that Jacob is 320 pounds and 7 feet tall. Seconds later, Amy hears a gurgling noise from the corpse's mouth, so she leans in. To her disgust, the body expectorates blood from its mouth and onto her face. Seth hands her a bandage to clean up and explains that it might have been a death rattle. He tells the colleague to head back to the office and he'll finish up. As she walks down the hallway, Amy hears someone calling her name from a room filled with sheet-covered bodies. Suddenly, 4 bodies sit up from their tables, and she realizes it's her friends Carter, Tamara, and Kayla and her brother Will, there to throw her a surprise party. Then, Holden joins the group and explains that he permitted them to have the shindig in the workplace. He also informs the friends that they'll need to surrender their phones so he can keep them in the safe in his office just to make sure that they can't take pictures of the bodies. She tells her brother that she wasn't expecting to see him there, implying a strained sibling relationship. The woman guesses it was Tamara's idea because she's always had a morbid fascination with death, joking that the friend's jealous of her occupation. Then, Seth appears and Amy introduces him to the group. Moments later, the brother approaches Seth and says his sisters deserve more than working the graveyard shift at the morgue. He adds that she deserves someone who can offer her more, implying that he disapproves of the man for Amy. The woman watches her colleague leave the party in a hurry and realizes her brother must have insulted him. Meanwhile, Tamara sits on Holden's lap and asks for details regarding the Blackwell Hotel incident. When she learns that they delivered the killer's body in the morgue, she excitedly tells her boyfriend Carter that she wants to see it. So the couple pretends as though they need to use the restroom as an excuse to leave the party and explore the building. Amy asks Will what he told Seth, and the man says he's disappointed that she quit medical school only to end up with a poorly paying job in the morgue. The woman counters that she doesn't live her life for the brothers or their mother's approval and that he should just accept her decision because she loves her job. Amy storms off, and when Will chases after her, Kayla tells him to give his sister some space. Concurrently, Seth mutters to himself as he continues work by pumping a dead body with embalming fluid. Meanwhile, Tamra and Carter enter the room where Jacob's body is. Despite the boyfriend's pleas, the woman unbuttons her blouse and straddles the corpse. She says that through reading about Jacob and his upbringing online, she learned that his mother Margaret, a fundamentalist religious nut, used to ceremoniously torture and lock him in a cage when he was a child. When Tamra kisses Jacob's lips, Carter calls her out and she teases that he's jealous. So she appeases the boyfriend by initiating intimacy but makes sure that she's looking at the body while he pleasures her. In the hallway, Kayla flirts with Will, but when she touches his hand, he emphasizes that he sees her like a sister. Nevertheless, the woman kisses the man passionately, and he reciprocates. Concurrently, Tamra and Carter make love on the table next to Jacob's. Seconds later, she notices that the body disappeared, and he assures her that their friends are probably playing a prank on them. Suddenly, the power goes out, so the woman lights a match. Unbeknownst to them, Jacob's still alive and standing right behind them. The killer attacks the couple, but Tamra manages to find the door in the darkness and escape. Jacob turns the lights back on and finds his mother's body inside one of the mortuary cabinets. He mournfully cries but remembers the abuse he endured as a child at the woman's hands, as well as how he took her life by impaling her head with a sharp metal rod on the wall. The injured Carter tries to run, but the imposing man grabs him by the shoulder and throws him to the floor. Jacob says he saw the sins he committed, but despite Carter's apologies, the killer strangles him. Moments later, the deranged man removes the gauze over his right eye, and he remembers how he incurred the injury when someone impaled him with a metal pipe. So he grabs the burn victim's mask from the operating table and puts it on. Then, he opens a cabinet with an assortment of tools on the wall. In the hallway, Amy hears Tamra screaming, and when she sees her brother and Kayla kissing, she admonishes them for failing to check on their friend. Meanwhile, Jacob chases after Holden, and the boss falls to the floor after the killer tosses a chained hook on his wheelchair. Then, Jacob snags Holden's foot with a hook and pulls the screaming man toward him. Concurrently, the trio checks the scale room and Amy wonders where Jacob's body is. Will points out the blood on the mortuary cabinet door, and to their horror, they discover the lifeless Carter inside. Suddenly, the power goes out, so Seth checks the embalming machine and sees that it still works despite the outage. In the scale room, Will says they need to call the police, but his sister reminds him that all their phones are locked inside the safe in Holden's office. Before going out to search for Tamra, the brother grabs a scalpel from the table. In the hallway, they happen upon Holden, and as he takes his final breaths, Amy apologizes because she doesn't know what to do to save him. Meanwhile, Seth checks the fuse box and realizes someone destroyed it. Concurrently, the trio runs into the distraught Tamra, who tells them that Jacob Goodnight's still alive. She says she and her boyfriend probably angered the killer by making love on the table next to him. Elsewhere, Seth drops his keys on the floor, and when he looks up, sees the masked man wielding a curved machete. The others arrive at a locked door that Amy says needs a security key to open, implying that they're trapped. Suddenly, Seth appears on the other side, and he uses his key to join the rest of the group. Seconds later, Jacob's arm breaks through the glass and grabs Seth, but they all manage to run away just as the killer kicks the door down with ease. However, the group separates, with Seth and Tamra together, the siblings holding up in a room, and Kayla ending up on her own. The blonde woman locks herself up in a bathroom, but she is unaware that Jacob's in there and the killer strangles her. He tosses Kayla to the floor, but when he sees his reflection in the mirror, he remembers how his mother's insistence that he's the hand of God led him to murder the people at the Blackwell Hotel. He tries to fight Margaret's deeply embedded religious teachings urging him to kill, much to Kayla's relief. However, Jacob asks the blonde woman why a sinner like her deserves God's help, and he watches her take her final breaths. Meanwhile, Seth tells Tamra that she can escape through the east stairwell because he has to stay and find Amy. Unfortunately, they find that Jacob chained a table to the exit to keep them from leaving. They enter a room and the man tells the woman to crouch behind a shelf while he hides under an operating table. Suddenly, the killer arrives, and the siblings see him through the glass partition. Amy realizes their friends are in danger in the adjacent room and says they need to do something. She bangs on the glass to catch Jacob's attention, but when Tamara makes a run for it, the killer hacks her neck with a machete, ending her life. Then, Will breaks the partition with an office chair, and Seth quickly jumps into the other room. As they try to escape, Jacob crashes through the wall and grabs the brother by the neck. Amy refuses to leave her brother behind, but Will insists that they go on without him. The man takes the scalpel and stabs the killer's shoulder. However, Jacob crushes his hand and jabs the blade into his chest. Amy and Seth try another exit, but all they find is Kayla's lifeless body strung up in chains against the door. They hear their brother's screams and the woman insists on going back to save him, so she breaks the emergency glass and takes the hammer inside. The pair descend the stairs to a lower level and they find Will lying strapped down to an operating table. As they try to free the man from the restraints, he tells them to run and save themselves. Suddenly, an electric knife bursts through his chest, and Jacob tips the table over, revealing that he was under it the whole time. Amy tries to fight the killer, but when Seth tries to save her, the deranged man injures his shoulder with the electric knife. They hide in a fenced area, but Jacob kicks down the chain gate easily. The pair stop to rest at a deserted corner, and the distraught woman cries when she thinks about how all her friends, including her brother, died. Seth consoles Amy, promises that he'll never leave her behind and that they'll get out of there alive. They reach a locked gate and Amy manages to find the correct key just in time before the killer catches them. In the embalming room, the woman says she needs to cauterize Seth's wound or else he might bleed out. He asks why she dropped out of medical school, and she says it was because she realized everyone ends up in a morgue anyway. She asks if he has his wallet with him, and he jokes that it's completely empty. Amy banters that doesn't sound promising for someone who plans on taking her out on a date, implying that she is aware that he has feelings for her. She tells the man to bite down on the wallet, takes a flammable substance, sprinkles it on his wound, and then sets it aflame with a lighter. Moments later, the woman tries to open a window, but it only goes halfway. Seth says he can't fit through and that she has to take his car and get help. Despite her protestations, the man insists it's the only way, so she takes the keys and they share a kiss. Amy wriggles through the tiny opening and ends up outside. However, when she senses the killer approaching, she slides back through the window. Jacob breaks the glass, so the pair stands against a wall so he can't see them. Suddenly, the woman remembers another exit they haven't tried yet. They head to a door on the other side of the building, hoping it's far enough from the deranged man's whereabouts. Unfortunately, Jacob's arm pops through the door and he stabs the woman in the stomach with a machete. The murderer opens the door through the hole, prompting Seth to run for his life. In the office, the man hits Jacob with a chair, causing him to drop the blade. However, when Seth tries to grab the machete, the killer steps on his hand. Then, Jacob lifts the man and throws him against the wall. Seth hobbles back to the embalming room and tries to climb out the broken window, but the murderer grabs his leg and pulls him inside. Then, the masked man takes Seth's leg and slides him across the floor, causing the shelf of jars to fall on top of him. Jacob lifts him back on his feet and hurls him toward the other side of the room, right next to the embalming machine. When the killer stands above him, Seth plunges the needle into his torso and turns on the pump. Immediately, Jacob convulses as blood and blue embalming fluid spill from his orifices, and he falls to the floor. Later, the mournful Seth returns to Amy's body, closes her eyes, and kisses her one last time. Then, he finally limps out of the building and gets in his vehicle. Eventually, he stops at the gate, which he'll need to open manually. He gets out of the car and removes the latch before pushing the barrier to the side of the road. To his horror, he sees the door to the back seat of his vehicle wide open. As he backs away, Jacob appears behind him, grabs his head, and drives his finger into the screaming man's eye sockets.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.